When I talk about ignoring the outside noise around a TV series or a movie and just going into it and judging it for what it is, this is the type of thing that I'm talking about. So after much speculation and some very misleading news stories about this show, The Last of Us has finally arrived for us all to judge for ourselves. So what did we learn? Well, I can honestly say that this is one of the rare instances that I was genuinely surprised at the faithfulness to the source material, at least in the first episode. And when it comes right down to it, I think the show's creators would benefit greatly if they would just shut up and let the show speak for itself. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
There's been a lot of naysayers out there about HBO's adaptation of this very popular and already cinematic video game. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. First and foremost being that most video game adaptations suck. I myself had some doubts. First about whether or not they would actually adapt the game faithfully, and also about whether or not they had anything to actually add to the story that would actually justify this show being made. And I also had my issues with the casting choices of Joel and Ellie. And now that I've seen the first episode for myself, some of those concerns have been put to bed. And at least one of them still persists. But overall, I have to admit, I enjoyed The Last of Us Episode 1 for the most part.
Get the fuck out of here! No, I cannot, it's serious!
As for the casting of Pedro Pascal as Joel, I've said many times I'm not really on the Pedro Pascal hype train like a lot of people are, and casting him in this role felt very similar to how they casted Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. It felt like they were just trying to put an it actor in the role, and not necessarily trying to find the best person for the job. Now, I'm not here to say that Pedro Pascal was the absolute best choice for this, but I will say, unlike Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, I was actually impressed with Pedro Pascal as Joel, at least for episode 1.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
To me, he perfectly encapsulated in his performance who I see Joel as a character. Clearly showing through his acting how he is a broken man who experienced unspeakable tragedy. You can see the pain in his eyes, and I think that's very important. And also, post-Outbreak, we get to see Joel as this man who is very loyal to his family. And he's a very straightforward and down-to-business type of guy. And Pedro portrayed all of that very well, so I have to give him props for that. As for Bella Ramsey as Ellie, I'm not 100% sold on her yet. She's got the feistiness, the intelligence, and the resourcefulness of Ellie from the game. But for some reason, from a visual perspective, I'm just not buying into Bella in the role. Plus, I found her to be somewhat obnoxious in episode 1. Now, Ellie could be obnoxious in the game as well, but in the game it came off as being much more charming. In the show, she just felt like kind of a bitch.
But you one crazy ass bitch!
I thought she did fine, but something didn't quite click with her portrayal. As for the story itself and its faithfulness, and whether or not this show is necessary when it comes to adding new layers to this story, well, I'm here to tell you that everything I saw in episode 1 was very close to the game, if not an exact match. There was even certain aspects and scenes that were a little bit more drug out and fleshed out. I kind of like the idea of them expanding on what we already know. It seems like a viable direction to go in when adapting anything.
That makes sense.
I don't think it's necessarily a good idea for them to do a shot-for-shot remake of the game, which they almost do, because to me they have to throw in some curveballs. So the people who played the game don't know exactly what's coming around the corner every single time. Basically, the best way for them to do that, in my opinion, is to take the same approach that the early days of The Walking Dead did. How they changed certain story elements and deaths just to keep viewers on their toes, even if you read the comic already. And I hope The Last of Us does something similar to that. Honestly, I can see comparisons with this show and early Walking Dead already taking shape, because the outside threat of this outbreak is only the beginning. The real story is with the characters who have to deal with that situation, and that's the approach the game took as well. And so far, it looks like that's exactly what they're doing in the show.
Because it's all part of the plan.
We get an extended intro to start off the show with Joel, his brother, and his daughter. An intro that includes one of my favorite things about a story like this. And that's when we get to see shit hitting the fan for the very first time. The beginning of the apocalypse. It's chaotic, it's exciting, it's tense at times, and of course, ultimately, it's heartbreaking.
Why do you cry?
Fast forward to post-Outbreak, and again, visually, it looks like everything was ripped right out of the game. From the rundown cities, to the wardrobe, to the quarantine zones. I thought they did a decent job of world building here, which I think will be very beneficial to people who didn't play the game, and it makes a lot of sense to appeal to old fans while trying to bring in new fans in a new medium. I mean, almost instantly you get a feel for what this new world is and what it's like to live in it. People are basically being imprisoned and controlled inside of these quote-unquote safe zones. And I say safe zones because it's not quite as safe as it would seem, as we see children being put down and public executions. It really shows you how barbaric people can be as they try to maintain some level of order. The general story of Joel trying to smuggle Ellie out of the quarantine zone for the Fireflies, and in exchange, he will receive everything he needs to go and find his brother Tommy, who has kind of disappeared. To me, it's a simple yet effective video game quest that's already proven to work because, again, the game was very cinematic as is. Again, this should be the easiest translation between mediums ever. Throughout the course of this episode, I saw shots and even entire scenes that were taken directly from the game. To me, they really nailed the tone and the feel of the game in live action. One thing that springs to mind is the attempted truck escape early in the episode.
Okay. They fucked you at the drive-thru, okay? They fucked you at the drive-thru.
With Joel, his daughter, and Tommy trying to get out of the city that's now thrown itself into chaos. There's a backseat camera angle where you hear Joel calling out which directions to go in, and it was, I shit you not, a perfect reenactment of that moment in the game. I also really enjoyed how they portrayed the infected people as well. We didn't get any clickers or anything like that just yet, but the way that they set up this possible threat in a prologue which features a scientist on TV just added another dimension to what is actually happening. It makes it feel like that maybe if people paid attention they could have prevented this. It might have been a bit too on the nose to include that scene, especially considering the scientist basically perfectly described what would eventually happen, but maybe we'll get to learn a bit more about the origins of this outbreak as the series goes on.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions, and I want to have them answered immediately.
As for where the show goes from here, clearly Joel is a broken man, haunted by his past and what happened with his daughter, and he clearly holds resentment towards this new world and how things are done in it. And obviously Ellie is going to be a big part of breaking him of that mindset. Not only by giving him purpose because he was tasked with protecting her, but also their interactions will remind him of what he lost and why it's important for him to keep fighting. And that's the whole essence of The Last of Us. It's a character study, really. And so far, at least after one episode, it looks like the show is heading in a similar direction.
You didn't see that coming.
Bottom line, I don't know if I was invested in the story as I was the first time I played the game, or if the emotional impact of the game is still there, because you're a little bit more disconnected now not playing in the game, and you're taking this all in as an outsider. So far, I have to admit it looks like they are trying to do that first game justice. For the first time maybe ever, it feels like a video game adaptation is being taken somewhat seriously. I can't speak for what might happen in the story beyond Season 1, but right now I'm enjoying it and I'm interested to see where this goes.
Y'all be cool. Shut up.